What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Scratch Agency podcast, hosted by Scratch Agents for Scratch Agents. This episode is brought to you by Virtual Intelligence, your premier partner for client-facing and back-office virtual employees. My name is Stephen Turnbull, founder of T5 Insurance Services in Clinton, New York, and I'm joined by my co-host today, the one and only, you already know, hold your applause, Mr. Sean Fitzgerald, founder of Sound Harbor Insurance in Long Island, New York. How we doing there, Sean?
Dude, I'm doing great. I had just a quick thing I wanted to share with you. You know me, I love my processes, I love my procedures, and I love my calendar and sticking to my calendar even more. Last 2 days, I had a nice 2-hour block for prospecting, and both days I found myself creating a new process. Shocking. But yeah, dude, I just want to let people know I'm not perfect at that stuff. It's super important to follow that set schedule, but I fall off track too every once in a while. But that's all I got. I'm pumped to talk about Scott today. He mentioned you guys were having a call off camera about hiring and making your first hire and stuff like that. So I'm pumped to get into that combo.
Well, let's do it. We're super excited and very grateful to have Scott Cox, who is joining the show today, agency owner of Minnesota Insurance and Wealth Management. Scott, how are you?
Good, guys. Appreciate you having me.
How'd I do on the name there? Minnesota? Did I butcher that, or is it spot on?
You're spot on.
Oh, perfect. I've been practicing that all day.
One of the few, but you got it.
Appreciate the time. I appreciate the conversation that we had a few weeks ago, last week, yesterday, whenever that was. But appreciate the conversation there. I know we want to talk about some stuff of just the startup in general, but just give us the backstory for those who might be listening to you for the first time. Who's Scott? Talk about the agency, and then we'll get into the details we wanted to talk about.
Yeah, thanks again. I've been in the industry almost 11 years. Originally born and raised in South Carolina, and had an opportunity in 2014 to come to Florida and take over an existing agency. There was a transition in ownership, and the new owner was looking for some folks to come down and kind of help run the office on his behalf. So my wife and I, Allie, we were just dating at the time. We put everything pretty much that we owned in the back of a moving truck and brought it down to Florida. We worked as producers for about 5.5 years. Ended up purchasing that agency in 2020. And it was, I call it kind of a hybrid. So technically we were a captive, but that captive carrier that we represented had left the Florida property market a few years earlier and had told their agents, hey, whatever independent contracts you can go get on the property side, we'll let you do it. So we were independent on the property side, captive on auto and financial services. And then in 2023, we made the decision to go fully independent. So that was a little over 2 years ago. And we've been plugging along ever since.
So did you go fully independent with that existing book then, or did you start from nothing?
So we were able to, because we were independent with the homes, we were able to keep that book. Everything else we walked away from.
From the captive side.
I know a lot of agents will do personal and commercial. Our agency is heavy personal lines. And then we do wealth management, financial services side of the business, at least for the time being, kind of in lieu of commercial insurance.
Sure.
I think trying to dive into commercial right now, we'd be spread a little too thin. But yeah, so we walked away from the financial services piece that we had built, all the auto insurance that we had built, took our homes with us and started from scratch.
Scott, when you say wealth management and the financial side, are you mainly talking about like life insurance or?
Life insurance. So our market primarily, the captive that we used to represent was heavily focused on educators and working in the school systems. And that's really where our lead gen, even today, comes from, is we market with our local schools and set up business partnerships. So being that we worked in schools, a lot of the financial services and the wealth management is around 403Bs, state retirement system, things like that. But yeah, life insurance is definitely a part of it.
Interesting. I know I'm sure Stephen wants to jump out of his chair and talk more about how you work with the local schools. So I'll just hop in there. What does working with the local schools look like? Like, how do you build the relationships, or are you generating leads from the schools you work with? Like, what does that whole process look like?
Yeah, that's something that we've done ever since 2014, and it's been great. That was probably one of the most positive things about our experience with that captive carrier was they taught us and they encouraged us to build those business partnerships. We've never really built our agency or generated leads around realtors or lenders or buying leads, so to speak, internet leads, things like that. We go to our schools and we'll sit down with an administrator and say, how can we help you? How can we support you? And what we found is that that's a pretty overlooked demographic. Um, they work really hard. They're, in most cases, um, kind of like your first responders. They're a really hardworking, underpaid segment of the population, and they need help as much as anyone. So we'll go in and we'll do educational seminars. Food's always a big hit, so we'll cater in, bring in food. We'll sponsor a coffee truck, ice cream truck, whatever the case may be, and just talk to people one-on-one. And that's how we do our lead gen. So we come back to the office and we have, I would call them warm, mostly qualified leads with phone numbers and emails. And, I'm interested in auto insurance or 403B or whatever it is that specific teacher or educator is looking for. And then we start running them through our sales process through the pipeline.
I don't know how I think we talked on the phone for like 30 minutes, Scott. I don't know how this didn't come up. So we'll try not to hijack the whole conversation with just this. But so take me through, for those that are like, I love that game. I love that community game. I love, like, we do a school program. I think everything you said is spot on. I think one of the hiccups and roadblocks that agents and agency owners might find with this is like, well, how do I get that connection? Like, for me, it was as simple as walking in the front door with the one that we have and having a connection of a teacher that worked there, right? But like, how many schools are you working with? Is it just one school that you have like a good solid relationship with? Do you have a few others that you do this with? And for the agents that are listening, like, how are you presenting this to the superintendent, to the district, in order to get into the door and make that relationship happen?
Yeah, it's really, at least for us. Now I know it's different everywhere, and to be honest, things have changed a lot since COVID, and a lot since to be completely honest, some of the school shootings and things that have happened
Sure.
has had an impact on security and access and things like
Yeah.
that. But it's really for us, it's just as simple as what you said. Walk in the door. Summertime's a great time if you want to start building those relationships because you don't have kids on campus. Unless there's a summer school program, you don't have teachers, but the administrators are there, and a lot of times they don't have quite as much on their plate as they do during the school year. But when I go in, it's very open ended. It's how can we help? Because every school is different. You may have schools where there's a ton of parent participation, there's a ton of fundraising support. And then you may go to another school and there's very little parent participation. There's very little fundraising support. So what that school needs, even though it may be in the same district or the same county, is very different than what a school down the street needs. So we just ask, how can we help you? Oh, well, we're doing our teacher morale is super low and we're doing a teacher appreciation program. Can you help us sponsor it? Sure. Hey, we've got an event coming up, but we don't have food and we need food. Can you bring food in? Sure. So it's open-ended to the administrator and to the school. And it's really, again, just going in saying, how can we support you? Now we have ideas if they don't know what they want, but most of the time they're going to tell you exactly what it is that they need or are looking for. One other thing I'll say about that, if you can, we've built our relationships at the school level. So we're talking to the principal, we're talking to the administrator at that campus. I think when you get into like district level, you run into a little more red tape, a little more bureaucracy. It's harder to build those relationships. But literally, show up at the school. Hey, I'm a business partner. We're local. How can we help you?
Yeah.
I like
think
that.
sorry, Sean, just one point I want to make there is like, you don't walk in the front door and say, hey, we're a local insurance agency and we have success helping people save money on their home auto insurance and they're planning and all this, and we want to talk to your teachers. Like, that's not what you
No.
said. You're just like, how can we
No.
help you, whatever. So from my standpoint, I think we attack the school game a little different just from our brief conversation, but like we do with the one that we work with now, we do a teacher appreciation program. So we go once a month. we've got to a science now where I'm in there for 3 minutes, right? We walk in, the teacher's there, meet them, hand them a local gift card, we take a picture, they're nominated, the school handles all of that. But I love the idea of just like getting more involved of like, hey, can we come in and do education things? Like, this is what we want to give back to the educators. That's such a, there's a lot there. But again, just starting. And I think, Sean, it reminds me of the conversation we have a lot about the recent conversation we had with Mike Cruz about the 3 buckets of when you talk to a prospect, not like, like, all right, let me get your deck pages and we'll quote you right away. Like, hey, what's your pain points when you're talking to a prospect? How can we help you? Like, it's a similar conversation. It's really a referral partner that Scott's built through the school district. It's just a different avenue to get there, right? And he said,
For sure.
he says he comes back from the event and has phone numbers, emails of people he talked to that needs assistance with things. And if we can just shift our mind as agents, producers, agency owners of like, we're here to help people rather than just push the sales down the throats, I think there's a lot more success in that avenue.
Yeah, I love the idea because you're right, Stephen. Like, if I was going to approach a lender or realtor who I think could be a business referral partner, I'm not going to lead with what you said before. Like, hey, my name's Sean Michelle. I'm with Sound Harbor Insurance. We help clients save money on homeowners insurance. I'm going to lead with the same approach as if I were walking into a school cold. Hey, who's the administrator I can talk to? I would maybe throw in there, hey, I am a local business owner, but I'm just looking to see how we can help you guys out, and like you said, asking those questions. So I think regardless of who the business referral partnership is, you would approach it the same way by asking questions and how can you help? So
last thing on this,
yeah.
Sean, I promise I won't take up the whole episode on this. Last thing is, I'm curious, Scott, of your experiences, because so far I've gone after just two districts in the near area. One, I tell people that I feel like I walk in with $1 million grant every month. They were like, let's do this. This is amazing. Thank you so much. Like, we appreciate everything you do. And like the other was like, oh, we're not really interested. We're not looking for solicitations. And maybe that was the way that I presented it, or maybe that's just the individual that I talked to. But like, just if we can dive a little deeper, like what are some of the roadblocks that you've got to develop these relationships and that has helped you come over of like, hey, no, we're truly just here to help and educate and all this, and the food truck and all that you talked about. Like, what are the deeper conversations you have?
Yeah, and listen, it's not every school we walk into says, yeah, we want to be a partner. Right. And not every school, to be completely honest, is a great partner. So you kind of, there is some trial and error, and you do have to, branch out sometimes, to 20 or 30 schools to get 5 or 10 that are going to be really good partners for you. And I think that's the biggest thing. If I get the idea that, hey, this principal's not on board, or maybe this school's not ready, or they've got everything they need, who knows, then we'll move on to the next one, and we don't really force the issue. But I think you would be surprised, particularly in Florida, we call them Title I schools. They're lower income schools typically, and the funding for those schools is, very little to nothing. And the teachers there, quite honestly, are some of the best teachers within a school district or within a county, because they're there. They really, really care about the kids. It's more than just a job and a paycheck for them.
Sure.
And you go in food. I think food's always kind of been the number one thing, and it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you go in and we really didn't cater. We'll go and we'll buy like sub trays and chips and cookies and fruit and have a cooler full of water and soft drinks. And, we'll be there for a few hours through the lunch breaks. Folks will come in, they'll get their lunch, and it gives you an opportunity to interact with teachers too. You don't really have to tell them what you do. Hey, why are you here? What do you guys do? What's your business? Well, this is what we do. This is how we support teachers. Oh, well, I just got my home insurance renewal. Can you take a look at it for me? And it's just very natural, very organic, lead gen that kind of happens without really having to promote, or I guess over promote your agency or your business. It's just, and again, it's not like that at every school, but we've been doing it for 10 plus years, and it's worked.
I love that. T5 question for you, and then I'll throw the same at Scott. Just out of curiosity, have you found that you're generating enough leads to make the teacher appreciation program worth it?
Yeah, see, that's an interesting question. I think we've wrote 3 personal packages off of it if I can directly correlate it
Okay.
back. But for me, I'm not. It's more of like it's a lot of things under one bucket. Like we use it for social media. We develop
Okay.
those relationships, right? So I'm not really looking at
Mm,
it as like, hey, if I go in here and spend a $25 gift card once a month,
I
that's
gotcha.
this amount of money. How much am I getting back? Because like in exchange, and again, I've only knocked on 2 doors. One said no, one said yes. The one that said yes has been an incredible partner, has been something. That's why I'm so excited to pick Scott's brain about this. Has been something we've really dialed in on. But like with the one that we do it, like they posted on their Facebook, we posted on our Facebook, they put us in their newsletter. And so like 2 out of the 3 calls that I know of that have come into the agency, maybe they've come in and not mentioned it, whatever, said, hey, we saw you, we keep seeing you in the newsletter doing this thing for the school. That's how we heard about T5 and that's how
Mm,
we called you. So I don't know. I'm interested to hear Scott's answer to that question, but I think it's more than just like what am I getting back in revenue, because you can use it for your social media, you can use it as the community. And it's what we talk about a
for
lot, Sean,
sure.
with the differences between your model and mine with the community versus the leads and the stuff like that. Like
Yeah,
it's more of a long game to get to that. But if you can
I agree
position
with that.
yourself as the give back community insurance guy, over time it'll continue to
Yeah.
build. Scott,
Yeah.
what's your thoughts on that question?
Yeah, I think you're looking at it the right way, Stephen. Not, okay, how much am I spending versus how much revenue am I getting back? But you're taking advantage of the social media, you're taking advantage of the community aspect, which we, I'll be honest, have not done probably as good a job of as we should have with particularly social media. But I think a lot of that's going to depend on your agency too, and what type of business you're focusing on. Because to be completely honest, if you're heavy in commercial,
Right.
that might not be the best,
Yeah.
you know, partnership opportunity or lead gen. But we're heavy personal, so everybody in that school drove a car to work that morning, and so that there's a personal auto opportunity. Most of them are homeowners. The majority are homeowners. So there's a home, and then again we have the financial services side. One thing I didn't mention, and this may not be something you do the very first time you go in, but we do. Um, it started out as just like, I think there were 3x5 or 4x6 lead cards, and they'd have little check boxes for certain lines of business, and then they have a place for name, phone, and email. We still have those, but we also now are using like a digital lead card with a QR code. It's tied to a job form that we've built. So we are capturing leads while we're there, and we're not just waiting on people to call us to say, hey, I saw you at the school. And that's one of the things I like about the way we generate leads is I'm not waiting on a lender to call me or a realtor to call me, and I'm not beholden to interest rates or the housing market. We get to control a lot more of the sales process doing it this way because, and you actually, I think, get to move further in the sales process quicker because they know who you are, they've seen your face.
For
When you
sure.
text, email a day or two later, they know why you're calling, right? Hey, I was at your school. You told me you wanted a home insurance quote. I'm going to send you a link for Canopy, whatever your process is from there. But it puts you more in control of the sales process. Um, and that's been probably 75 to 80% of our total business over the last 10 years has come from those
Wow.
Wow, that's
schools.
So,
incredible.
yeah, I want to hear about, we might not even talk about the hiring topic at this point because I feel like this is so good. The QR code you created, w-
Mm-hmm.
what are you putting it on? Is it on, I'm just curious, like, how's that whole process work as far as collecting the data through that? Like, so you sponsor a food truck.
Mm-hmm.
Where are you putting it on a sign? Like, I'm just curious what that whole process is
It's
like.
pressed right on top of the burger bun.
Yeah.
Pressed right on top.
No, we actually have a couple of local small business owner coffee trucks that we've partnered with that have been great. And we pay for the coffee. We have the principal, assistant principal, whoever our contact is at the school, send out kind of like an invite or an email letting everybody know when we're going to be on campus. Coffee truck rolls up that morning. Everybody lines up. And then to your question, Sean, about how are you using the code? How are you generating leads? We'll have they're just little plastic stands. You can put like an 8.5 by
Mm,
11 piece of paper, and we'll set it on the window or on the table of the coffee truck. And a
mm,
lot of times we'll tie it. We'll do a giveaway. We'll do like Amazon card giveaways. So we'll do 2 or 3 while we're there. Hey, if you want to enter the drawing, and then boom, once they hit that, takes them right to we use Jot form, takes them right to the Jot form. It's super simple. Name, phone, email, line of business. If they're interested, we tell them, hey, no obligation. You can just get in the gift card, whatever.
Yeah.
And then we use Zapier to connect that back to Agency Zoom, and the leads are sitting in Agency Zoom when we get back to the office.
Yeah, Sean, I don't think we're going to change topics. So the one thing that I want to emphasize too, Sean, to your point of your last question is like, so Scott can go to the school for an hour and maybe 2 people come up out of the 100 people that walk by the table and are interested in an auto quote, right? But like that doesn't account for, and it's very hard to track for in the community game, in the school game, whatever we want to refer to, of the 10 people that see Scott back this month with the coffee truck and saw him the month before, but then don't call him till the next month because they get their renewal that came up and they're upset and they're like, oh, that Scott guy's in the school all the time. You know what I mean? And I think that's to go back to like, what is it all for, like all together? And then think of like the social proof that Scott said. It's a warmer lead because they know Scott because he comes in with a coffee truck every month to school, and that's already like that relationship's teed up. So I think
That's No, I
yeah.
think I agree. I think it's a really smart play, especially if you're heavily involved in the community, like you are, T5. And I think it also could tie into recruiting in some way, because at the end of the day, like Stephen, you doing the teacher appreciation thing, right? Like making an impact, you're giving back, you're living by the core values you've set for your agency. So now when you're talking to potential producers or service people or whatever the case is, they're going to see you're living by your core values, which will help in the recruiting process for sure, especially if that's something that attracts to somebody,
Yeah. I do want to pivot real quick, even though I said I want to talk about this, because I do have a few questions that I thought about in preparing for this. Scott, tell us what it's like to start an agency with your wife.
That's
And
a
I
great
knew there would be a
question.
giggle there, but this is an interesting conversation because something Sean and I have talked about with we're up to 110 episodes now with the
Yeah.
people we've talked about, and there's some dynamic duos from a husband and wife standpoint that would do great, and there's some that have the conversation of I might bring my wife in for under these roles and all of that. But I know, Sean, you wanted to talk about that, but I think it's interesting you mentioned that when you guys were dating, you worked for a different company and kind of were in the insurance game together, and then now you had that captive, and now like you've been through kind of all the journeys. Tell us about that and maybe advice around it, cautions around it, whatever it might be,
Yeah.
about just working with a spouse in general, family, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Well, for us, it was kind of by default. She was working for, this is going all the way back to 2013, 2014. She was working for the agent, or an agent that we knew in our hometown, who was purchasing the agency in Florida. And he approached, I think, his whole team, but she ended up being the one that said, yeah, I'd be interested. About 2 weeks later, it goes, well, hey, would you want to come too? And so that agency owner, we sat down and talked through things. And sure enough, Allie and I ended up coming down here together. And like I said, we've been working as a couple and as business partners for the last 10 plus years. And I mean, there's nothing like I can pinpoint to say do this or don't do that. I mean, it's worked for us. We try our best, and it doesn't always happen, but to separate we have our work conversations at work, and we have our home and our family conversations at home. And sometimes those cross over. I don't think it's something that every couple could do. I've had people flat out tell me I could never work with my husband or I could never work with my wife, and I get it. So it's probably not for everybody. But I guess the one thing I could say is, if you're going to do it, or if you are doing it, try and keep the work conversations at work and the family conversations at home.
Yeah. I guess, I can't imagine what that would be like. But I would imagine you would just have to have, your communication level would have to be through the roof. Kind of like how if you're trying to improve your relationship, right? Like you have to over communicate. Yeah. So
Well,
you
I
Yeah,
got
ask
you
it.
got a you got a boss at home and at work, Scott.
I
but
ask
on
it
the
in
flip side of that too, like Sean or Steven, if you guys come home from work, you know what you're dealing with, right? Your spouse may not.
For
And
sure.
you may not know what your spouse is dealing with at their job. Allie and I don't, we both know. Like, and
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
that
that's true.
helps,
I bet it
because
does, yeah.
you may come home and vent about all the frustrations or what happened that day or whatever, and she may not understand or she may not, whatever. Allie gets it. So when I'm upset about something or she's upset about something, I know why,
Yeah.
because I'm in it just like she is.
Yeah, I asked the question because and I knew you'd probably answer something along that regard. And anytime anybody brings it up, they either say, "Oh, it could be great," or most of the time, "I could never do that." Like, let's just call it what it is. Most of the time, it's like, "Oh, I could never start a business with my spouse, work with my spouse, whatever." But like, I think of it in the sense of like, if you can make it work, what a superpower, right? You're like building a life outside of work together with your spouse, building a family, whatever you decide to do, and then
For sure.
building the life together with the agency. I think, and obviously, it's worked great for you guys through the different seasons that you've gone through. But that's why I wanted to ask that, because I just think, people are quick to say, "Oh, I couldn't make it work," but like at the same time, the what ifs is an interesting conversation. Sean, did you have something else? I can see it.
No.
Okay. I
No,
wanted
that's
I want to dive a little bit, Scott, into the day of the agency. Now, how long has it been since you've been pivoting to full independent?
January of 2023, so a little
Okay.
over 2 years.
So I was asked this question, and I've never asked this question on the podcast, and that's why I'm excited to debut it right now, Scott. But I was asked this question yesterday, and I thought about it. And I'm like, I feel like I want to ask that question to everybody in my life, but I absolutely love it. So, Scott, I just want to ask you, what keeps you up at night in regards to the agency? What, as 2 years being an owner of the independent agency, the pivots that you've done from captive to independent, from working in someone else's agency to now owning yours, the first thing that came to your mind when I asked that question, what keeps you up at night?
I think the thing that I think about the most is, and this is something I've talked to other folks about and have honestly kind of struggled with for a while now, really ever since I moved into agency ownership, from being a producer, is what I did today and what I'm planning to do tomorrow, the thing that's going to benefit myself, the thing that's going to benefit the agency the most. Am I allocating my time in the best? Because we all know there's 1,000 different things we can do. We can work on our processes. We can prospect. We can work on the leads that we have. We can, recruit. I mean, there's all, and none of those things are bad, and they all need to take place. But the thing, Stephen, that I probably think about more than anything is, what I do today, was that the best use of my time to move this thing forward, and my plans for tomorrow and the next week or whatever in the short term that I'm planning on doing. Because a lot of times I don't know, like, is my time best spent calling prospects? Is my time best spent working on my SOPs? Is it best spent recruiting? So that's what I battle with more than anything. And probably when I'm laying in bed at night thinking, okay, what I have planned for tomorrow, is that the best thing for me to be doing with my time?
Okay, so I'm going to dive a little deeper here. I mean, this may be a question, Sean, we move every time going forward. I love this. So with all that said, if that's the common theme of what keeps you up at night and what you think about, like, what's one thing that kind of puts you back into the saddle of like, yes, this is the best use of my time? Is it like doing a daily planner? Is it like checking in on my, like, auditing? Sean talks a lot about like auditing your day, making sure you're working on the right activities. Like, what for you have you found over your experiences of the last 2+ years of owning the independent agency has been the key to kind of get you back on track when those thoughts come up?
Yeah, and maybe this isn't narrowing it down quite as much as you want, but I think, sale. I'm a big believer that sales will cure pretty much anything. Um, and with revenue you can hire. With revenue you can set time aside away from selling to work on your processes or do the other kind of working on your business things. So I think when I have a day, when I look back, I'm like, all right, I knocked out my prospecting calls. We moved leads through the pipeline. We did things that drive revenue. That's probably when I feel like, okay, I checked the boxes I need to check today.
Yeah.
Not to say again that the other things aren't important. Like, I'm right in the middle, and we've talked about it. I'm right in the middle now of hiring. I'm in the middle of, implementing and putting processes on paper that I should have done years ago. But I think if I was to pinpoint one thing, sales will cure about 95% of your problems.
Yeah, you bring up an interesting point, Sean. I want your thoughts on this because we talk so much on document everything when it's just you. Set up the processes and procedures, make sure, which is all great. But I think you got to think about like that gray line too. And I think of the Instagram video Brett Young put out a few weeks ago about like just get to $1 million in revenue, right? And then you have a business, and then figure it out, and then work on your hiring struggles, and then work on like and all those things. I think you get so focused in like the side of like setting everything up, where to your point, Scott, is like you don't have a business if you don't have the new revenue, if you don't have the new policies coming in the door, if you're not growing. Like I think that's such an interesting balance that we don't maybe talk about enough on the podcast.
Yeah, I think I'm with that 100%. I think at the end of the day, we're in a people relationship business, right? So I think if anybody answers that question as far as like what keeps you up at night, you got to know what your vision is, right? And to Stephen's point, Brett's point, Scott's point, revenue has to be the primary focus in the beginning. You got to stay afloat, but you have to know where you're going. And listen, if we're all opening independent agencies, our key focus for 99.99% of us is going to be growth and scale, right? So if growth and scale is our number one mission, we should primarily be focusing on growth and scale, which is recruiting, building a team, but you need to have some revenue in the door first. So process and procedures are great. That's something I live by. You should definitely have some basic ones in place, but revenue and recruitment should be like the main priority, you know?
Yeah.
It's good.
I think if you ask me that question, Stephen, 5 years from now, the answer is probably different than it is today.
Yeah.
But walking
Sure.
away from 75% of our book of business, which means 75% of your revenue 2 years ago, you ask me that today, the answer is, putting policies on the books.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. That's so good. Look, we're going to wrap this up for time. Everybody get out behind the desk, as Scott House says, and go knock on those school doors after listening to this episode. That's for sure. Make those community relationships. That was some good stuff there, Scott. And Sean, that's what I love about the unscripted part of what we do, man. We're just figuring it out, man. And then look at that great conversation. That was fantastic. Scott,
About
thank you
new
so
hires,
much.
yeah.
Yeah,
Thank
we're
you,
going to talk
guys.
about new
Appreciate
hires.
what y'all doing.
Scott, thanks so much for taking the time to join us. If somebody wants to pick your brain, I'm sure you'll be open to it, just about the school conversation or anything you said specifically. What's the best place to follow your agency, reach out to you? What's the best place to do that?
Yeah, we're on Facebook, Minnesota Insurance and Wealth Management. Email is probably the best and the quickest way. It's Scott at Minnesota. I for insurance, W for wealth, M for management.com.
Awesome. Everybody, that's another episode of the Scratch Agency Podcast. Thanks for joining us. Do us a favor, like the show, share the show, and subscribe. Make sure to check us out on the Telegram. It's a free community we have for the Scratch Agency Podcast. Go to scratchagencypodcast.com. Big orange button, join the community. Most importantly, remember to dig down deep, believe in yourself, and own your own future. We'll see you next week. Take care.